basically he brings up 2 or 3 important points. Fred's saying, look, on earth it's very, very common to believe that you're going to meet up with your family when you're in heaven.
It is.
And Mahaneen says, well, that's not even logically possible.
No.
Because once the couple marry, who's their family then? And if they have children, who's their, and if those children marry, who ends up being the family you're reunited with?
Exactly.
Which is a very valid
Are you reunited
point.
with a whole hundred of thousands of them from 10 generations past, or whatever, who you're reunited with?
Exactly. And, you know, great Aunt Dorothy, do you know?
Who you never met.
Who you never met. Are you that interested in meeting her?
Yeah.
And he basically says that there's another thing that brings people together, and that's actually common affection, common interest, a common desire.
Yes.
And that's better.
Yes.
And actually...
that actually works on Earth too, by the way.
Yeah.
It's just often not allowed to work on Earth because of the family in many cases. It's like many times if you went and engaged a life with somebody else, you know, who your family disapproves of, you often get ridiculed and rubbished and even excommunicated by your family when you do that, right? And this is something that normally happens on Earth. And yet it doesn't have to happen. If the family on Earth was more allowing of all these relationships developing, oftentimes by the time a child's 20, they might not see their children very frequently because their children are off, a parent I'm talking about now, on Earth, may not see their children very frequently because the child's off doing this thing with this friends and doing that thing with that, and really connecting to their soul and engaging all the things they love, and that's different to the things that the parents love.
Yeah, yeah. And that's... But, of course, that doesn't happen on Earth. Why?
Mostly because of the indoctrination that we receive from our family, isn't it?
Yeah, to tell us that we have a duty and we're bound, to these people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also there's this implication on Earth that if you do not spend much time with your family, then you don't have much love in you. And that's not true at all. In the spirit world, there's plenty of people with huge amounts of love in them. In fact, they're at one with God, so they've got large amounts of love, and they've never spent any time with their family for the last 2,000 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So, so the reality is spending time with your family isn't a judge of love. All it is an indication that you're either drawn to them, if it's a pure decision, or you feel forced to be with them. It's one of those two things.
Yeah, yeah.
And if we feel truly drawn to them, we won't feel a feeling of obligation towards our family.
Yeah.
If we felt truly drawn to them, we'd just want to spend some time with them without feeling obliged to spend some time with them.
Yeah.
Just like we do with anybody else. Because from God's perspective, we are all family anyway.
Yeah, and that, like Mahaneen says it very eloquently in very beautiful terms. And he also says that under that system, if you feel happy for other people in your family because you know they're off doing things that make them happy rather than feeling bound.
And I feel that's another problem on Earth. Oftentimes the family isn't happy that somebody from the family has gone off doing the things they like or want, because there's often a feeling in many parents of, I don't want you to go and have to do what you want. Nobody's allowed to on Earth do what they want. I wasn't allowed to do what I want, so I'm not going to let you do what you want either, type of feeling a feeling of rage coming from the parent towards the child. And so that's many times they are the direct impediment to the child doing what they want.
Yeah.
That's not the case in the spirit world. Nobody impedes a person's pure desire to do the things that they love to do. Yeah, yeah. Which is welcome news, I think, for many probably on Earth.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And then Mahaneen builds on this theme, and he says, every individual soul born into our life has become, by its life on Earth, self-conditioned. And God has provided for it, having respect to 2 facts only. And these 2 things is what I was think there's some worthy discussion involved in these 2 things. First, the law which ever works to secure holiness. And the next, the means to attain that condition under the most favourable circumstances to the individual.
Yes.
So really he's saying there's law, and you and I know it's not one law, it's it's a group of
Group
laws.
of laws, yeah. The law
like
of love, you could call it.
The law of love. And like we say here, it's like a collective now. The law.
Yeah.
It's the law of the land.
Yes.
This law, that's this law of love that governs the spirit world.
Yeah, it's the law of the land in the spirit world.
Which is designed to bring everyone towards holiness, which is really...
Yeah, or to state it more probably purely, it's designed to bring everyone into a higher condition of love, which is what the desire to be more holy really is.
Yes.
To come into a higher condition of love. So the law for everyone is designed to bring them into a higher condition of love.
Mm-hmm.
So that's number one.
Yes, and that means that you want that to happen under the most favourable circumstances possible.
Correct.
And so this law governs where you go when you pass, because it's not, I want to go and visit my family. There's a law governing, because that law dictates who I'm with is going to mean that I'm under the most favourable circumstances to grow towards love.
Yes.
To grow towards becoming more loving.
Yes. Of course, that's assuming that I accept the allocation of my space in the spirit world, and many don't, and that's why they're earthbound for a period of time beforehand.
Yes. Yeah, because sometimes when we have strayed far from love on earth, the conditions most favourable for our growth in the spirit world
are the hells.
The hells that reflect to us the consequences and implications of our unloving actions.
Correct.
And so a lot of people don't want to face that, and they go, I'm going back to earth.
Exactly. But even the hells are the most favourable location for a person in that condition. It's like if you put the person in the hells into the second sphere or third sphere, they'd create havoc. And this is the reason why God created this kind of system. So these people are placed exactly in the position, they're attracted and drawn exactly to the position that's going to have the most positive benefit to help them learn about love.
Yeah.
And whether they accept that or not is really up to them, up to their free will. So they can choose to accept that and then work with that, or they can choose to fight against that, rebel against that, and their condition may even worsen them. Until they get to a stage where the pain is so great, they stop and they go, now I better learn about love. At some point, we're all going to have to go, now I better learn about love at some point.
Yeah.
And so for some, that point is like, unfortunately, terrible. They have to get to such a sad, terrible condition before they desire to do that. And for others, they want to do that while on earth, and so they start growing in love while on earth. And in fact, all the laws reflecting around earth are all designed to help you do that as well. Unlike what most people think.
Yeah, exactly.
They're all designed the same way.
Yeah, I that's one of the most beautiful things that I see in God's design, is that there's always laws acting upon us to bring us towards love. Like how loving is a parent who's designed absolutely everything in your environment to draw you closer to love, and to love of yourself, love of others, love of even God herself. Yeah.
And the reality also is, if it's not easy for us to love, then it's because we're using a lot of resistance to love.
Yeah.
Because the reality is all of God's laws support us being loving. So if we're finding it hard to be loving, then it's because we're in a lot of resistance to love. It's not for any other reason. It's not like God made this terrible universe and it's really hard to love in it. It's completely the opposite of that. God made this wonderful universe. It's really quite easy to love in it once you're willing to do so.
Yeah.
That's the key thing. And so this is like the first part of this sentence that you read. He's really showing that, okay, this is the law that governs the land. And it doesn't just govern the land of the spirit world, it governs the land here too. But unfortunately, most people on earth ignore that law and substitute for it the law of this land, which is often very selfish and also often very destructive. Or they substitute, and most people do this, they substitute their own law, which is, I want to do whatever I want anytime, thank you very much, and I'll work out any excuse for doing it. And unfortunately, because of that, they have no idea that this law is still governing their soul, still affecting their condition, and as a result, it's going to rapidly determine, once they arrive in the spirit world, where they should exist.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I suppose there's that second aspect, isn't it, that he mentions there, the means to obtain that condition under the most favourable circumstances. And so that's the second aspect of it. So there's this law based on your soul, but then there's also the provision of the means. And every single person, if every single person on earth knew that no matter what they chose to do on earth, once they pass, even if they pass into the hells, surrounding them will be the means for them to learn how to become more loving.
Yeah.
And they knew that there will be people available to them if they call on them, if they really want to become more loving. So every time they exercise a pure desire to change, there is all the things given to them that they need to change.
Mm-hmm.
All of the things given to them. And if they knew that, then they'd probably be less afraid of dying, they'd be less afraid of the spirit world, and also they'd be more reflective about their life on earth here, I feel. Because they'd want to choose to do things more in harmony with love here, so they prepare themselves for their arrival in the spirit world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what he's talking about in this one paragraph has a huge impact upon people if they allowed themselves to contemplate the information.
Yes, and the next 2 pages really, I feel, there is so much that if you really consider what is being said and apply it to life right now,
Mm-hmm.
it would affect a lot of the way you,
Mm.
the way you live and act, and even the faith that you have in God.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he's really saying in the next paragraph that I can only see the possibility, well, in the future, I don't know. I know that families don't hang out together, he's saying.
Yeah.
I know that
From his own experience.
From my own experience. I
Yep.
know there's this other thing that draws people together.
Yeah.
And in the future, I don't know, except I can see the possibility of forming groups of twin souls in one great family of heaven until many other stages have been passed.
Mm.
And of course, really, he's talking about soulmates there.
Correct.
Yeah.
He's talking about the soulmate relationship
Yep.
and the fact that it exists,
Yep.
and that eventually it won't be just one half of the soul that meets into a group and is attracted to a certain group while the other half is completely neglected.
Yeah.
It'll be that the 2 halves are drawn together, and then those 2 collectively will draw other 2 halves together.
Yes. In
Yes,
groups.
In groups.
Yes.
Yes.
And there are relationships. Their relationships are rightly termed. That's a typo there, I think. No, their, as in the place.
Mhm.
Their relationships are rightly termed blood relationships, but flesh and blood cannot enter this life, and therefore kinship has to be lifted into another more spiritual bond of God the Father. We are born into the Spirit, and thus become brethren and sisters of one great family of heaven.
Mm.
So he's saying really the real blood relationships are the soulmate relationships.
Correct.
And
that's
makes
where
perfect
you
sense.
begin with your family.
yes, yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And yeah, that's really cool. And we know that to be true.
You're a bit blasé about that one. It's one of I feel it's one of the most essential truths as well about the universe. You see, I feel a lot of people on earth, and particularly a lot of people again who come along to our seminars, are ignoring totally this relationship, this soulmate relationship. They're not wishing to resolve the question as to who their soulmate is because they're afraid of resolving such questions. They're not wishing to progress towards meeting their soulmate or being with their soulmate in a soul connection. And the reason why they're not is because they're not engaging their true nature and desire. And if they had of, they would be finding themselves automatically through the law being drawn to the other half of themselves.
Yeah. So it's, to me, it almost feels like on the planet, because there's so much injury around the issue of family, there is a lot of us are not living connected to our true nature and desires and personality, because instead we've taken on from our families the type of people we feel that we should be, the type of life we feel that we should live. Which is more
probably the type of people they feel we should be.
That's what I mean. We've taken that. It's their impressions of who we should be that dictate the most of our life. What we do for a job, how we live, how we spend our money, how we spend our time.
Yeah.
For most people on
And
the earth right
desires we
now,
engage, more importantly, because it's a lot about the desires, isn't it? Meeting the other half of yourself is about you engaging your pure desires and living in harmony with your pure desires. And you can't meet the other half of yourself if you don't engage that in some way.
yes. I suppose I see all those things as an expression of your desire.
Yeah.
How you spend your time, your job, all of those things. That's
True.
all based on what you do, isn't it?
Yeah.
On what you want to do. And
Yeah. But often at times, it, unfortunately, like you pointed out, it is what our parents want us to do, not what we want to do. So it's
Yeah.
not really what we want; it's what they want
yes.
for us. And as a result, we finish up being way away from the other half of ourselves.
Yeah, I suppose that's what I wanted to say, is that it seems like we live as products of a family unit rather than or of a set of family injuries about the type of person we should be. We take that on and then we don't, unless we challenge that, we don't end up operating under the laws that, like these laws that operate in the spirit world, have the potential to operate upon us here on earth,
Well,
don't
they do operate here.
But
Like
we fight them, don't we?
We fight them. That's
Yeah.
what we do. We're fighting against them. We're
Yeah.
actually, and that's what makes our life more difficult, of course, because we're fighting against them. It's not like I said earlier. If we were naturally doing what the law stated, things would be a lot smoother in our lives, actually, because all of the laws are there to make our lives more smooth if we love. And part of this soulmate relationship is about love. There's a lot you learn in that relationship about love that you cannot learn in any other relationship. And so when you're avoiding that relationship, what you're really doing is you're shutting down a large portion of these laws. You're working against them. And while you're working against them, you're going to experience the pain of working against them, of course, which means that most of your relationships will be difficult and hard to engage. And when you meet your soulmate, because you're avoiding all of the laws, even that relationship's going to be difficult to engage until you start engaging the law.
Yep.
And start seeing that all of God's laws are perfectly in harmony with love, all aimed towards helping you grow in holiness, as the quote is here, or grow further in love.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just a beautiful system, I feel. And
So do I.
I feel like we often, like when we speak to people about soulmates, there's some people who you speak to about it who you can feel they have an opening towards the other half of themselves. And so they are attracted to conversation about who is the other half of myself. What are they doing right now? What emotions and desires do I need to connect to in order to meet them? And they're very interested in those conversations. But then there's quite a large majority of people actually who have no desire at all to meet the other half of themselves, and are working actively in the opposite direction to these laws. And then they come up with all sorts of justifications, like, what's going to happen to my current relationship? What if my current relationship isn't a soulmate relationship? And all these questions get asked one after the other, implying that God is somehow unloving in creating this particular aspect of our growth. And yet the reality is, all we're doing is fighting the most loving person in the universe who created this loving law, which will assist us to grow. And it makes no sense to me, but I see a lot of people doing this all the time. This is why there are many single people who come along to our seminars, because they're already fighting that law. They're already fighting this concept as well. And so they come up with excuses for their concept as well. They're earth-based excuses for the concept, such as, what's going to happen to my family? What's going to happen to my children? Well, won't you love them still? Won't you love whoever you're with right now still? If the person who you're with right now is not your soulmate and you meet your soulmate, won't you have a loving way of dealing with that information? If you really had a desire to love, you would. Right? So there should be no trauma in the sort out of all of that stuff if everyone involved really wanted to love.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is what I see as the main problem about these questions. Like, I remember when I first met you, the whole soulmate issue was pretty much off the table, wasn't it? And I feel that's the case for many people. Like, they live in this place where they want to have the right to select the other half. And while you're allowed to have the right to select the other half, because that's free will, at the end of the day, if the other half that you've selected is not your real other half,
Yeah.
it's going to be a bit pointless in the long run.
Well, the truth is you can't select your other half. It's already done.
Yeah, exactly.
It's finished.
It's done and
By
dusted.
the time you've got a body, that's it. It's over.
Or even before then, it's over.
But I mean, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
It's not anything that's within your control.
And you can
if
spit at God and condemn God for creating such a system. But at the end of the day, God is the most loving being in the universe. God would have created this system for loving reasons. And most people who are not honouring that are not trusting God, in fact.
Yeah.
They don't trust that God will help them to sort out any issue that might arise as a result of that issue.
I also think that a lot of us hate ourselves because of our true selves, I mean.
True.
So
the worst thing is to meet the other half. They're just another person that we hate.
Yeah, if I can explain that a little bit more for the viewer.
Yeah.
When we grow up in a family that we have our unique personality that God created within us, but if our family unit doesn't encourage or even like those parts of us, then we can internalise that and start to hate our very true nature. And so then meeting the other half of us isn't attractive because they are just reflecting to us
what we don't like about ourselves.
What we don't like about ourselves.
Or to be, again, more accurate,
precise,
what our parents don't like about us.
Yes, that we've taken on, you know.
And unfortunately we meet the other half of ourselves and there's now two people that the parents won't like.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes.
And we are often so addicted to getting approval from our family that we will deny the characteristics and traits that we have within ourselves that are also within the other half of ourselves, just for the sake of maintaining this relationship with our parents, which is actually who are not our parents at all, because God is, and who are basically harming us in this projection or in these desires that they have for us to not be who we really are.
Yeah.
So there's a whole set of problems there as a result. If you look at all of the different emotional injuries that Afra had here, asking these questions, they are all imbibed in the actual relationship between parents and children, which also then means that by the time the second half of the child comes along, the parents are already got their clear ideas of what they like about that other half and what they don't.
Yeah.
Yep. And if that other half has been developed in the different directions, because they had freedom to develop in different directions than you, then of course you're also going to be quite challenged, because now you've got to go against your parents in order to enter this relationship.
Yeah.
And for most people that's almost the thing you've got to avoid at all costs.
Absolutely.
And it's only after they pass in the spirit world that they start entertaining the concept.
Yeah.
That they're allowed to engage a relationship with the other half of themselves, no matter what their parents think.
But even then, it's not a magical thing that happens once a person passes. They still have to deal with those emotional injuries and false beliefs that they took on during their childhood.
Yeah.
This is why parenting is such an important job, isn't it?
Well, I think we shouldn't call it a job myself. I think we should just call it an institution that's been created by people on earth in order to manipulate and control little new souls that God has placed on the earth. And in the end, the true parent is God. So we shouldn't even call it parenting, because God's already doing the parenting. All we need to do is the brother and sistering. In other words, we need to see each other as brothers and sisters.
Yes, but but I do feel that God created like this, the process of having a child and being, if it was done in a pure way, you would be more progressed in love. In terms of understanding God as a parent. And understanding yourself.
But you wouldn't
as a soul.
see yourself as a parent at all.
No, but you would, if you were a good brother or sister, want to impart the wisdom that you had, wouldn't
Correct.
you?
Which a good brother or sister would want to do.
Yes.
You'd want to be able to impart the things you have learned about your parent and about the universe that your parent created, and all the things you haven't learned, you'd be honest about. And all the things you disagreed with, you'd be honest about, instead of trying to force them down the throats of the little brother or sister that you've now brought into the world.
Yeah.
And so this is where I feel, one of the main problems with parenting is that we've got to get away from the idea that we can parent.
Yeah.
Because we're not parents.
Yeah.
Literally, we're not parents.
No.
And even when we give birth to a child, we are not parents. God is the parent. we are the surrogate. We are the surrogate, and we're only a brother or sister to this child.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have the right to do anything with this child that God wouldn't do.
Yes.
So this is something we also need to consider.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel that, again, that's one of the major injuries on earth. There is this feeling amongst parents that they have the right, that there's ownership, that they have the right to do whatever you like. And quite often you hear, and you've even had it said to yourself, you're my daughter. You've got to do what I say. You've got to listen to me. No, you don't. No, I'm sorry, you don't. You've got to listen to God sooner or later. But even then, God doesn't say you've got to. God says you can listen to me or not. You're going to experience the pain of not listening to me if you don't. So it's a free will choice. God doesn't ever say you've got to. So the fact that a parent is saying they've got to is already out of harmony with love.
Yeah.
So, I feel this chapter is so good in terms of highlighting many of these errors, the errors with regard to soulmates, the errors with regard to family, the errors with regard to who your friends really are, and all of these errors, they're all just highlighted in one chapter. And I doubt whether many people who have read the chapter have given it that much consideration.
No, and I wish I myself was a little bit better prepared for this chapter, because there is so much in it, like I said, and I haven't had much time this week. But if we keep going, Frederick now exposes himself in another way, showing another one of his injuries.
Yes,
he says, would you tell this to people on earth, what you've just told me?
Exactly. What a terrible mess it will create on earth if people know the truth.
Yep. And Mahoney says, well, of course I would. Because isn't it the thing that would actually bring people together?
Yes.
It would, and I agree with him.
Yes.
Wholeheartedly.
Yes.
That not only that family is a earth-made construct,
yes,
and that the real family is we're all brothers and sisters, but also that all of God's laws are acting to bring us towards love, and at all times, and we have the means to do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's really alluding a lot of way through the chapter, of course, to my words in the first century, where I said that my brother or sister or mother or father are those who listen to God and do what God's laws dictate, basically.
Yeah.
And do the will of God is how it's quoted in the Bible. But the reality is that they do become your true mother, father, brother or sister. It's not your family, but rather the people who become your family through attraction.
Yeah.
And it's those who are attracted to growing in love, and if you're attracted to growing in love, they'll become your family. But those who are attracted to evil still, and if you're attracted to evil, they'll become your family.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter what you say, you want to go and see your family. Well, no, they are your family. They are the ones who have the same way of thinking you do, the same way of doing things that you do. They are the ones who have the same unloving condition or loving condition that you have. And so they become your family.
Yeah.
That's the true family.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And he says here in the following paragraph that pure affection, whether between members of the same family or not, is an attribute of the spirit and not of the flesh, and can only be secured or dissolved by spiritual approachment or estrangement.
Yes.
And that is pretty profound in terms of the fact that most of us think that even outwardly displays of affection and family, going to family gatherings and doing the right thing and getting mum the Mother's Day gift and all of these things, that equates to affection. And Mahoney's saying it's not.
No.
It's a spiritual thing. Yeah. And it is affection, really, he's saying it's based in, like if we term spirituality as growth in love.
Yes.
It's about something that originates in your heart. And whether you have it for your family member or for someone else, that's the thing that binds people together here.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that surely is something that everyone could see logically, because it makes like if you think about the average person on earth, they go along to a family do, like as we call them here in Australia. Well, I don't know what they call them overseas, a family function or a family gathering. And most of the people going along don't really want to be there. Do you know what I mean? And there's usually fights and arguments, and all of the unhealed stuff that's happened all the way through the life of that family gets usually brought up during the period, or ignored completely.
Yeah.
So everyone's just detune and have a beer or something like that. And nobody's really connecting with each other, love. They might have brought gifts even, but there's no real love connection in that place. So what's the point in having them? There's no point in having them unless there is a love connection. And you don't have them just because mummy wants one, or dad wants one, or brother and sister need one or something. You do it because love draws you to do it. And so in the spirit world, of course, that's exactly what happens. So there's far less parties with family in the spirit world than there is parties with family here on earth as a result, because the parties in the spirit world all happen amongst the people who are all drawn to the same location at the same time for a similar purpose.
Yeah.
And it's got nothing to do whether your family are there or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the other thing that he keeps saying is that that's a good thing.
It's a great thing. It's a great thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I suppose then Frederick's displaying kind of throughout the rest of this chapter, he's concerned that if you tell people that there's not eternal damnation, or it's not all as soon as you pass, that there's still possibilities for you to grow in love and to be closer to God and stuff. He's worried about that, like, what's that going to mean?
I was wondering, before we go to that though, where we just talk about this, the whole concept of...
Oh, the last repentant soul?
Well, no, the concept of the fact that, like, this child who has now who is in the process of passing.
Yep.
He can see his parents if he wants to see his parents.
Yes.
But it is highly unlikely he will even want to see his parents.
Yep.
When there is no love bond that would draw him to his parents. So even though he can see them if he wants to, it is highly unlikely that he even wants to.
Yeah.
Because the love, the only thing that would draw him to seeing the parents is the love that would be in the parents for him. And it's pretty obvious that the parents probably didn't have love for him to be going to somewhere else other than his parents.
Yes.
Otherwise he possibly would be going to his parents to learn and so forth. So it's quite obvious that even the question, is it possible he will never see his parents again, is again another demonstration of another injury of Fred's. Like, what, if we don't give him to the parents now, does that mean he'll never see his parents? Well, of course not. Of course it doesn't mean that at all.
Yep.
It means that while there's no bond of common desire or love, that he'll probably not want to see his parents, but he has the freedom to see his parents whenever he wants, as long as his parents are in a darker condition than he is. He can go to them any time, and if they were in a brighter condition than he was, then they'd probably likely be with him already. So of course he may see them at some point in the future. The question becomes, would he really want to? And if most people on earth were honest about their family, they would have to ask themselves the question, do I really want to see them? and if most people were frank with themselves and honest with themselves about their true feelings towards their family, they'd probably go, maybe I don't really want to see them, at least while they're like they are. Do you know? And this is something that we don't consider on earth. It goes, we feel there's some kind of love-based obligation, but it's not a love-based obligation, it's an addictive-based obligation, it's a codependent obligation that causes us to feel that we need to visit people who obviously don't care about us, or obviously don't have similar desires to us, or even if they do care about it, obviously they don't have similar interest. Like, why would you want to see such people? Like, I don't see any problem with not seeing such people. You see the people who you want to have, who you have interest with. So I
agree.
Again,
I feel like I lived so much in my life in an effort to please those people around me. I lived so far detuned from my desires. I had to be searingly honest with myself about how I really felt in those situations, because I think I felt like that was the only way I was going to get any approval or love, was to emulate the desires of those people I grew up with, when in fact a lot of them were not my own at all. So it does take development, doesn't it, in yourself and in fostering
and also
your own
development of your own will to a large degree, doesn't it? Because you have to honour the fact that I'm not really drawn there. Like I remember, I know you've said to me that often you'd go home and you'd get asthma straight away, and when you were away from home there was no asthma. And there's an indication that obviously there's a feeling of oppression at home that's not there when you're away. And so when you're honest with yourself, you go, okay, I go home, I get asthma. I'm away, I don't get asthma. There's got to be some reason why I get an asthma here, right? There's some kind of physical response to the environment. So it's got to be related to the depression that I feel when I go home. And why do I feel so suppressed when I go home? Because I am suppressed when I go home. And do I want this anymore? And this is where most people don't use their will. What they do is they think that not going home, for whatever reason, means they don't love the family anymore. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that you no longer want to put up with the fact that you're not loved anymore. That that you don't want to put up with the control and the manipulation anymore. That's all. And when the control and manipulation stops, I'm sure you'd be reattracted to them because they're people from your past, and you'd want to catch up with them again. And this is where I see, a lot of people are in that boat on earth, but they completely deny that feeling that they have.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to, just even having the feeling, even though it existed within me, most certainly, but me having the feeling was so scary.
And you felt guilty,
I felt
you
selfish,
weren't loving,
guilty.
you're selfish. But they are all emotions that the parent created in order for you to have to spend time with them in the first place. And that's the irony of this is that quite frequently the very emotions we're feeling weren't even created by ourselves in the beginning, they were created by the parent. So I find family relationships have got to make severe changes on earth in order for there to be any happiness here on earth. And that's pretty self-evident, I think, because the majority of people's hardships, problems and feelings are all revolving around how they were treated generally as children through their family.
All right. So really, in answer to the question that you just raised earlier about whether Limpy Jack was going to see his family again, Mahaneen answers that in very eloquent terms. And he says actually that he has a vision for the future where all families will be reunited because everyone will have come to want God and to want God's way.
And to also want love.
And to want love. And to repent and to want to love. And so he sees heaven complete. This beautiful concept that where every soul will be drawn together, and in that way, all families will come together
naturally. Naturally so, because the more you're drawn to God, it's like you're drawn closer to each other as you're drawn to God. There is the common concept amongst some people who think about free will, and they think that because we have free will, that people are not going to be drawn together. I know there's many people who are interested in the Paget messages who read them, and I've often had a look at their forums, in the past and seen that they've talked about how it seems that we can't cooperate with each other. It's because we all have so individual personalities. No, it's not. It's because you don't love. It's because you haven't learnt how to love and you haven't received God's love even though you're claiming to. Because the reality is when you receive God's love and when it touches your soul, you're drawn together with other people who are in the same condition. You're not repelled by them, you don't push each other away, and you cooperate easily in that state. It's really easy to cooperate with people who have the same condition of love as you.